Hello, welcome to the AP7 podcast. You are here with Rachel Donovan and the founder of AP7, Mr. George Helou.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you for joining us. We love talking about how to get the heart into everything we do to get a lot out of life.
Whether it be relationships, business, careers, you name it. So, let's get started.
George, I was wondering if you could, you use the term a fair bit while I've been doing podcasts, and I'm sure you do day to day, which is fractal patterns.
Yes.
And to be honest, I still don't feel like I'm all that clear about what that is.
Yeah, sure.
The term.
Yeah. Well, one of the first fractal patterns that is commonly known is the golden mean. It's that Fibonacci sequence where you see a spiral going inward, where Leonardo da Vinci has shown it. And so that fractal pattern is quite interesting because it never ends. In other words, it goes in, but it's kind of like an infinite spiral in, so that you can zoom in and see it's still following the same pattern of spiraling in, but also you can zoom out and see that it will just spiral out into forever. That's probably the easiest way to explain what a fractal pattern is. There's a set of geometrical equations that govern the angle of curvature of that spiral, and it spirals at an exponential rate inward and it spirals at an exponential rate outward, obviously, at the same time. So with that, what it tells you is that you can actually go into the finite small, and that fractal pattern allows a world to exist within that because it never ends in how it's designed to always exist in the way it behaves, because it can fit in the tiny and then in the tiny within that into forever, which is quite mind-boggling. It's probably good for red wine and campfire conversations on rich philosophy of how does this work? Information is amazing, I often think about that whole idea of binary. So, like 1 and 0.
Yeah, a computer programming.
Yeah, and just with those two things, like 1 and 0, you can build everything. Now, how's that the case, Rachel? Come on. Flex that brain muscle of yours.
I have no idea. Numbers are not my strong point. You're probably going to hate that I've said that. I should say things like that.
All right. But think about it. You can use as many ones as you want and as many zeros as you want.
Oh, right. So it's sort of infinite then.
Yeah. So you can now mix and match how many combinations of ones and zeros and make each pattern mean anything you want. You with me?
Yeah, like a language also.
Yeah, that's it. So if we said 1001 means color, then what we could do is go, all right, well then 1001, and then whatever we put after that, like a one could be black, 0 could be white, and then we can go 101 is grey. So in other words, 1001, 101 is grey. And therefore, can you see how you can make infinite colours just out of patterns like that?
Do you know what? I don't know if you'll find this a little bit freaky, but before, as I was just saying that before, numbers aren't really my strong point. And what I was about to say was I prefer things like colour. And then you went and used the example of the binary being colours.
I like to accommodate with my intuition.
You were reading my mind. Yeah, right. Okay. So then how that sort of applies to us.
All right. So when you look at a tree, what allows the tree to be strong and have structural integrity is it follows the Fibonacci sequence of how it allows its branches to shape so it can bear a lot of load. So if it's, carrying fruit and other branches on that branch, you see? And the fractal pattern says, even from the beginning of the tree growing, it's following a fractal pattern. It goes split into two constantly. So, the first little sprout comes up, and then what happens? You see it split into two directions.
Really?
And there's this constant splitting into two. So eventually, as it grows, it has another obviously, I'm working it out with you, right? It has another algorithm that says, I must consolidate and thicken my branch in proportion to the growth we're now having to support as we grow higher. So you notice how a tree has thicker at the base, and then the branches start to have to get thick as well, and they get thinner on the ends. And then initially when it's splitting, it's just little thin sprouts, but then eventually they become branches. So when you look at a tree, it appears random, doesn't it? Like it kind of looks like not too random, like obviously it's contained itself in some form. But when you look at the little decisions it's made, where its branches are and the leaves, it does appear a bit random, like not so tidy and orderly. But I thought about this for a while and I thought, well, hang on, I don't believe nothing is random. I believe that based on the seasons and based on cycles of heat and cold and drought and flood and whatever, when a tree is growing, based on the environment it's in for a period of time, would determine how quickly it splits if it's got the resources, or how slow it does because it doesn't have the resources. So you can imagine over 30, 40 years, 100 years of a tree growing, it would go through years of scarcity and then years of abundance. And therefore, there are times where it would grow fast and times when it wouldn't. And now it appears random in how it has its own shape.
So have you identified fractal patterns within yourself?
That's an interesting question. Yes, in terms of I'm a part of everything else and my true identity is, in a sense, the only thing that makes me different to anyone else is I hold my own space of existing, but then the fractal patterns that govern the physics of my existence are the same as everybody else. So in other words, I have my own dynamic life force and I'm able to observe things and I'm able to hold assumptions as filters and warp my perception. So those are fractal patterns that allow us to play with reality, Rachel. You see, you wake up in the morning, you go out into this world, but it's really just a canvas and you're the artist, and everyone's conditioning us with how to imagine the world. So if you want to look at a fractal pattern, it's the free will to imagine it in any way, but we're raised with the idea that no, there's a reality, and that includes your worth and your capability. And that's where it all goes pear-shaped for me, which is why I'm so passionate about, personal development, is that how do we keep the way we should imagine the world where we understand we can fall off cliffs while not confusing that absolute with your worthiness and your capability. Because what happens is we start to take on ideas that govern how we feel and what we experience about the world, but also our attempts to achieve and succeed. And that therefore, say we're trying to succeed and then we're wrong about something. And then other people have been conditioned to believe that when you're wrong, you should panic because it's a very bad thing to be doing. And you should raise your voice and freak out at someone else being wrong because no one wants to be wrong, right? But what happens to us is we register that as we're being judged, we're not worthy, no one wants a bar of us. And some people panic and actually fulfill that prophecy and start to treat other people like that as well, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can untangle a lot of the dumb assumptions that try to contaminate our worth and our capability, and also try to compromise, marginalize how beautiful and abundant life is, and then we keep the reality being grounded in the limitations, like, yes, there's solid matter, and yes, there are unpredictable things that we need to mitigate from having accidents, like don't shake a coconut tree and dance underneath it. You know, basic things we all know. If we can separate those two things, that would be pretty cool. So, yeah, are there fractal patterns in me? Well, fractal patterns that are in me are in everything anyway. So, see, that's the thing about a fractal pattern. It expresses in so many contexts. It's actually quite amazing. Like, for example, the ratio of your arms from your elbow to your wrist to your fingers, like, see what I mean? Your hand to your elbow and then to your shoulder.
Yeah.
Following a Fibonacci sequence, Rachel. Why? Because when you carry things, you need structural integrity. And that algorithm to proportion something like that gives you leverage so you can hold things with strength. And you see?
So it needs structural integrity, and also, is it behavioral?
Well, behavioral is another context. So do you remember there was a podcast where we spoke about the 4 levels of attraction?
Yes.
Okay, that was a fractal pattern. And so the fractal pattern was about attraction. So one of the fractal patterns is we're attracted to structural integrity. Why? Because we want to be around things that are strong and have their act together and not all over the place and flimsy and overextended or too shriveled up and closed up. We want something that has got that beautiful balance where it's strong to handle the elements, but it's connected enough to embrace the opportunities. You see? Don't you find that attractive in people?
Yes.
Someone who's got that
very
balance?
Much.
Yeah. And so do you remember we then looked at the context of physical appearance? We try to put makeup on to make our eyes look balanced to the nose and the mouth and all that stuff. And then apparently big boobies are showing that we're so maternal and able to, we could be the bosom of life for our family. And so suddenly people want to get, boob jobs to sell the brochure that they're ready to take on that world, which is nonsense, really. In the scheme of things, it's nonsense to do that. But can you see what we're doing? We're trying to emulate that beautiful balance of proportion. So
proportion, yeah. But it's gotten a little bit warped, hasn't it, now, though?
Well,
our proportion is unnatural.
That's right, because we're chasing only the superficial aesthetics of it. But that's not what the structural integrity, the only relevance that I know of, that I can think of in nature, is to attract a mate. So you notice how they kind of come up with really cool songs, birds, and then there's all these weird animals and spiders that do a dance, and apparently it attracts them.
Spiders.
It's actually amazing. But
yeah, the penguins do their dance.
Do they?
Yeah. I don't know that from the movie Happy Feet, but I'd like to say I read it in some article, but no, just from the movie.
Oh, that's cool. I posted something on Friday, and it was a penguin that looked like it had ADHD. All the other penguins were just chilling out, and this penguin was running around, jumping. It was like jumping, up, down, there, over here, over there. And all the penguins are just ignoring it. And it accidentally bumped into one. And, it's actually very funny. And so, the caption that I wrote was, is this the only penguin that knows it's Friday?
Oh, that's good.
Thank you. You'll pay that one. Anyway, so we looked at, if I can show you that my appearance is balanced, then you're going to assume that what's on the inside reflects what you're seeing on the outside.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're going to assume that I'm with it. I'm the kind of person that is solid, good critical thinker, but at the same time, I'm an artist and I create. And you want all that because that's important in life. And for someone who's balanced, they're going to have their left brain and their right brain working. They're not going to be so dominant on one that the other one's basically not in operation. And you know what's funny? We seem to accept personalities. Oh, that person's just a logical person. That's why they're an engineer. And, oh, that person's an artist. Yeah, they're very creative, but yeah, nah, they're not very logical. They're not very good with that. And we think that that's just that person. But that's nonsense. In the scheme of things, you weren't given a left and right hemisphere of a brain so you can choose which one you wanted to use. They're both there for a very important reason.
They're both there, yeah. But one's just more dominant, or is it all used more often?
Yeah, look, and I don't know why one's dominant in terms of whether it's the way we're raised and whether parents are emulating qualities of thinking and relating that we end up mimicking, and they may be more focused on being creative or be more focused on being logical. I don't know. I'm less likely to believe it's just genetic. And if it is genetic, it was selected to help you because there was this idea that you need to be very creative in this environment to thrive, or you need to be very logical. And then that person got swung one way or the other. I'm a big believer, though, and you know what's interesting? They often say that women have more neural connections in the corpus callosum, between the right and left hemisphere, so that their ability to integrate their creativity and their intuition with their logic, because, you know, you can imagine multitasking for a woman over many, many centuries. A woman has more to think about in one time when she's got kids running around, she's got a house, she may even have a small business going or not. You know, like, and you guys communicate so much easily, concepts, and you can talk over each other and still absorb what you are talking about. Like, this is amazing. I don't know why we're not studying you more in the laboratories. No, anyway. No, but can you see how they're men? There's all this joking about how they're a bit, you know, one-dimensional and they're thinking.
Simple, yeah.
Hey, calm down, all right? Yes. Now, but what I find interesting is that you're more empowered when you make more neural connections between the two. So I don't buy that we were meant to be like that as males. I think really, and I was very fortunate. I played the drums. I took seriously mathematics and all the other stuff that apparently I had to learn in academics. And I was left-handed, which was a bit weird, and then I was corrected. So I think there was something in there about, you know, they say that left-handed people are more creative. Now, I don't know. I don't know why that's the case. I wonder if you're using your left hand, it stimulates the right creative brain or something. You follow me?
Yeah.
You know, that's going on. And then for me to be corrected to the right, it stimulated my logic, even though I had my left. And then here I am kicking with my left and playing pool with my left and wondering why, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I played the drums, suddenly I was balanced and I could, you know.
So you ambidextrous?
Well, yes and no.
Or can you still
Yes
write?
and no. Like, I can't write with my left because it's too intricate. And these days we type so much, you know, I'm finding it hard to write with my right. It's a bit weird. But I can paint, say I'm painting a house, I can just go from one hand to the other and it works well. And I can do archery with both. And pool I can only do with left because I kept playing with my left. But the right, I do it sometimes just for convenience. So it is a little bit of ambidextrous, but I now brush with my left, even though I brushed with my right all my life. And now I can swing between the two and they're easy.
Brush your teeth?
Yeah, and I did that deliberately for my brain development to keep reinforcing. So I actually recommend that, guys. Like, if you are doing something on one side, just for the sake of discipline and developing your brain, I highly recommend starting to brush it with the other side and starting to do just things that don't matter, you know, things that don't matter, that you can do it a bit slower. And even writing, like I write things neatly with my left hand and I realize I flow really well and all that. But with my right I do because I practice all my life with it, you know. I don't know how we got onto this topic, but I think it's to do with...
Well, it's your brain,
Yes.
isn't it? And your programming or your,
And we are designed to be balanced. And that was the whole point of this. We're designed to be balanced, but our insecurities throw us out of balance, and insecurity is not attractive. So that was the podcast that we covered with the 4 layers. Can you see how that fractal pattern? There's a pattern of when you're balanced, you're strong. And when people want to get together to make more babies, they want a partner that's strong because you don't want to make weak babies. Simple. And so therefore, women are attracted to a man they think can support the family, aren't they?
Yeah.
And see, that's a fractal pattern at work. And obviously it's not just restricted to humans. Animals are doing this. And that's why, like a peacock who has the most fabulous, ornate feathers and, colours, apparently that's giving that peacock an edge. Why? I actually don't know why, but maybe it's to do with what a strong peacock to be able to grow that level of...
all the feathers.
What kind of structural integrity and foundation can allow that level of spectacular, orchestra of feathers to be happening in such beautiful, expression. So, So does that help with what fractal patterns are?
Yeah, it definitely does help. I'm just trying to, I guess, now next time you use it, I think within the context of a podcast, when you refer to it, it'll be good now to have that background.
Yeah. You know what I also realized just then? I talk about principles. Principles are guiding you with how to think, feel, act, because there are a set of assumptions that make you strong and powerful. So in a very funny way, I've written 52 empowerment principles, which are really fractal patterns that are context specific. So in other words, when I say context specific, I'm talking about an empowerment principle of focus is in the context of your ability to hold your concentration on one thing long enough to understand it properly and therefore be informed and make good decisions. One of the empowerment principles is trust, and therefore there are a set of assumptions about what trust is, how important it is to trust yourself and trust others, but within your means and within their means. So the fractal pattern says, don't lend money to someone who never has any because they always spend more than they make, which means they never learn. You know what I mean? Don't lend them money unless they're in deep trouble, but make it a one-off and then help them see their pattern or whatever. Don't lend it to a gambler, because I've done that in such a bad way. I lost heaps of money because I found out someone was a gambler, right?
Yeah.
So if someone, like one of my close friends, and I'm not going to mention their names, says to me, George, you know not to tell me to keep a secret, because I can't keep a secret. So that's his beautiful way of saying, I don't want to let you down, and I need to tell you where my means are. And I have a big mouth and I just want to talk about anything and everything to anyone.
Talking.
So if you tell me something, consider it broadcasted, okay? And so can you see?
That's good of him.
But not everybody does that. So you need to observe how people are sharing with you things that they shouldn't about other people and all that. And then you go, okay, so this person doesn't seem to have much of a awareness around what would be good to keep to themselves in confidence for the sake of someone else. So I will only share with them things that I'm willing that they ban to other people about. So anyway, so that principle, can you see how there's a fractal pattern in there where whatever you share, observe what contains information and what doesn't, and whether you want that information contained or not. And therefore you become empowered because you can predict how things are going to play out, and you can make better decisions of how to trust and who to trust. And if you're not really good at something and you're trying to make out that you are, or you invest too much money and resources assuming that you are, and then you're not, and then you burn all your money, that's you trusting yourself beyond your means. Just because you've got the potential to expand your means doesn't mean you should trust it prematurely before you've developed it.
Okay.
So it's really amazing how that dot just joined, that a principle is a fractal pattern that facilitates structural integrity and the ability to protect and to grow. In other words, survive and thrive. And that's what the 52 principles are. They're all about when we're at our best, we are strong, empowered, and thriving in what we're doing. So every time I do assessments on clients, I'm finding that all these 52 principles are in them.
Yeah.
And every time they're struggling, they literally are not following any of the principles, which means they're not following all of the fractal patterns in nature that are governing, surviving, and thriving.
Yeah, it's out of balance.
It's completely out of balance. And you know what's funny? And the reason why that happens, which is really good to tie in with fractal patterns, is that, look, nature is about surviving first. I mean, you're no good thriving if you're dead, right? But the problem is for us, we start to think things are threatening and we're trigger happy, misinterpreting and overreacting, and we end up isolating ourselves. You with me? Now, here's the thing. If you are playing it so safe that you're not connecting and put yourself out there to enjoy giving of yourself and receiving with others, right? Eventually what happens is you so isolated, you're bored. You know that whole social interaction that's intrinsic to us? If you negate that for too long, we suffer. We actually, our health suffers because we're there to be given, receive affection.
I think our longevity suffers, doesn't it?
It does. So many studies have been done on this. You know?
Yeah.
We're meant to be connected. We're meant to give of it ourselves. So when we're too isolated for too long and disconnected, we're denying our purpose and why we're here. And it can't last. We get really restless. We get agitated. It's a very disempowering place to be, you know?
Yeah.
So I really think that ultimately for us to emulate nature, you look at nature and you'll notice there's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of animals that interact with one another, and plants are a part of helping each other. Things grow on a bark, for example. You know, bugs hide in the bark. You know, like everything is interconnected. Everything's together. So isolation is literally against our existence, because you see, you wouldn't know you existed if you weren't being affirmed by your environment. So we are literally defying the very laws of existing when we've decided that our environment is against us and we're going to push it away. Now, isn't that interesting? So I guess that's a fundamental fractal pattern, that whenever someone's depressed is because the world that they're seeing is not lovable for them, and they're not feeling loved and daring to give of themselves because they feel attacked and not appreciated. So they depress from it, searching for answers, and then they can't stay depressed. And if they don't have the imagination and the resources and support to help them reimagine a better way, they end up needing help. And some people have the medication, right? That we talked about in the podcast, you know, depression is natural.
Depression, yeah.
Yeah. So that helps us understand the power of fractal patterns, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I feel like now that we've spoken about this, you know, once you're aware of something, then I'll start noticing things more.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, anyone else who's listening will start doing the same thing. So, that kind of awareness. So thank you, George.
I look forward to hearing from you about what fractal patterns you're noticing.
Appear, yeah.
Cool.
Well, thanks for listening to our EP7 podcast. We've loved having you with us and look forward to chatting again very soon.
Absolutely. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on another EP7 podcast. If you liked what you heard, remember to share and subscribe so you're notified of every podcast released. If you have any questions or would like to connect with us, please jump on the EP7 official Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you.